Bucknutters, welcome to the Bucknuts Morning 5 here on Monday, September 18th, 2017. I am Dave Biddle, and I'm very happy to be joined by Patrick Murphy. Patrick, before we get into the meat of the show, talking about the actual football game from this past Saturday with the Buckeyes winning 38-7 over Army, I want to get into the drama with Kirk Herbstreit and a couple of the recruits the Buckeyes are after. Micah Parsons, well, you could argue the Buckeyes maybe are not after Micah Parsons anymore, but Micah Parsons and Jackson Carman, they both spoke out after the Oklahoma game, joining the brigade of people that were calling for Dwayne Haskins to be the starter, for JT Barrett to get benched, and Kirk Herbstreit fired back on Twitter. Didn't mention them by name. It just said, recruits shouldn't do that. And then they both fired back. Jackson Carman said, I don't think USC's or Clemson's coach would have a problem with me doing that, although I'm sure they would. So they kept going back and forth. And then Kirk's not letting this go. Herbie is not letting this go. On game day, this past Saturday, he said, quote, a lot of the times the big-time recruits are not worth it. And I agree with that. A lot of times the big-time recruits are not worth the trouble because their heads get too big. They can be not good for the locker room. I agree with that. Sometimes the big-time recruits are not worth the trouble. Here's where I think he went too far. He said, quote, 5-star recruits are a dime a dozen, unquote. And, that's just not true. There's a finite amount of 5-star recruits. Your thoughts on this whole thing? Where do you come down on the Herbie situation and the two recruits?
Yeah, it's funny. I want to start, I guess, by saying I really like Herbstreit. I've met him a handful of times when game day's been in town. He's always been great. He's been out at the playoff games and whatnot when we've been there. So, he's a very nice guy, obviously a former Buckeye, and I respect everything he does with college football. But he does tend to get into it on Twitter. I know even now, kind of following this, he's got into it with some Nebraska fans, about their team and whatnot. So I don't know why he kind of picks these Twitter feuds. It's kind of just the way he handles himself on there. But this one especially is confusing to me. And I get it that, he was at the game against Oklahoma. He was at the Indiana game. So he's seen, JT Barrett's first two games of the season in person. You and I have talked about this and I don't think we'd put it all on JT Barrett either. But, with that said, I don't know why he felt that he needed to get involved in this. Even Urban, who could have made a statement about, recruits saying things like this, just kind of left it as, yeah, we saw it, and there was an apology put out, or not an apology, but kind of a retraction of the statement and whatnot. So it just seems strange to me that he's gone so far, even especially bringing it up on game day. Obviously, like you said, they're not a dime a dozen. We do at 24/7. 25 5-star guys. That's quite a few given how many high school players are going to make it to the next level next year. So, there's a reason these big time programs are after some of these guys. Now, do you want them saying these things about your quarterback? Probably not. But, these guys are allowed to have an opinion, and Twitter these days is where people put that, for good or for bad. So, well, I don't think it's a great look to have your recruits, especially guys on official visits, calling for the backup quarterback. It didn't set me off, I guess, the same way it did Kirk, and the fact that he's continued to go after these guys is a little surprising to me.
Very well said, and now that Herbie has said his piece, I hope he lets it go now. I think he has said enough. You could argue he has said too much. I hope he just now lets it go. Let's move on. Let's get to some brass tacks here about the game and moving forward, what this means for the Buckeyes. Let's start with Tuf Borland. We'll get into the quarterbacks in a minute, but Tuf Borland really making his Buckeye debut. Redshirted last year, barely played in the first two games of this year. Chris Worley gets hurt. They put number 32 in there. People are like, who's this guy? And 12 tackles later, everybody's talking about Tuf Borland. People are asking, did Chris Worley get Wally Pitts? I don't know. It's too early to tell. And I've said for years, I'd be contradicting myself if I didn't stick with this, that probably the most overrated stat in football, Patrick, is tackles. Because you can literally, as you know, you can be a linebacker, you can get trucked by the running back, and he happens to fall over your face mask because he's knocking you over. You get credited for a tackle. Or you kind of miss a tackle, and then 30 yards down the field you catch up with the guy, and then you make the tackle because other guys float him up. So I don't want to say the guy had 12 tackles, so now he's going to be Chris Spielman. But I tell you what, I'm intrigued by Tuf Borland. He has more of that middle linebacker build than Chris Worley did. A lot of people are wondering maybe could Chris Worley move to the outside. Dante Booker hasn't played that well. I could see that happening. Just wrap all that up for me. Your thoughts on Tuf Borland, and if you think that, he might secure a starting job or at least be in the mix for one.
We talked over the offseason about whether Chris Worley was the right fit for the middle linebacker position to replace Raekwon McMillan. I think the biggest question for him was his size. I don't know if that's really been an issue so far this year. I think Chris is a good leader, but he might be better fit for the outside, especially if they have someone who can step in and play that middle linebacker role as well as they've had it the past few years. It's only one game and it's Army, but I thought Borland was very disciplined. Like you said, the tackle stat can be misleading. I don't know if this one is. Maybe, a few of those tackles, I'd have to go back and rewatch every play he was in. But to get 12 tackles on basically your debut, so to speak, on the defense, I think it is pretty impressive. The linebackers in general I thought were better. Now, they did change the scheme quite a bit for Army's triple option. They usually only had 2 linebackers on there. But the most interesting thing, I think, was that Chris said after the game, one of our colleagues, Ari Wasserman, for The Athletic, walking off the field, asked him about the injury, and he says he could have gone back in. So, obviously he was walking off the field, was in a good mood. I walked right by him when right after the game ended, and he was, looking into the crowd, talking to people he knew, and seemed to be, pretty happy with the win. So I don't think he was pissed off about not going in or anything like that. But it is interesting whether, they decided he wasn't playing well and took him out, or whether Tuf was just playing well enough that they were like, hey, Chris, we're not going to risk it, especially against an Army team that likes to chop block and things like that. So this is certainly a question going forward. Did a new linebacker kind of emerge here to get in the conversation, or was this just a one-game thing that was situational? We're going to talk to Urban today, and I'm sure that's going to come up. So I'll be very interested to see what they have to say and how they kind of use that going forward, because I think, you at least have to give this kid another shot to see if this is legitimate.
Yeah, as you mentioned, we will talk to Urban Meyer today around 11:45 a.m., so keep it locked to Bucknuts. Coach Urban Meyer today about 11:45 a.m. A few more topics will get you out of here. The quarterback situation, J.T. Barrett, I thought overall played well against Army, but then again, it's Army. He did miss some passes. There's no doubt about that. Then Dwayne Haskins comes in. It's against Army's backup defense with the game in hand, last drive of the fourth quarter. I get all that, but he did look good. All the people that have been calling for Dwayne Haskins are now, that's been amplified. There's a thread on our message board that says, I've seen enough. After these 4 passes, I've seen enough. Dwayne Haskins should be the guy. Maybe he should be the guy. It's such a small sample size. It's hard for me to say after 4 passes, yeah, he should now, take over as a starter. And 4 passes against Army's backup defense, like I said. But he did look very good. We saw him in the spring game. He looked good. Just your take on the quarterback situation.
I've defended JT quite a bit. I think that there's a lot of reasons, and not all of them just the way he can throw, that is why he's in there, and Urban said as much. I don't expect a quarterback change unless JT gets hurt or this season goes in the tank, and even then, I'm not sure Urban will bench JT. I thought, and this is what we expected, JT was going to look good in this game. He's going to look good next game. You're going to get the 200-plus yards, pretty high completion percentage. We're not going to know how JT is mentally and whatnot until we get to, maybe a Maryland challenges him a little bit. Nebraska hasn't looked good, but going there. But Penn State's obviously the game that everyone's pointing to, where we'll get to see, can JT come out and get it done. You mentioned the spring game with Dwayne. A really good day. 3 touchdowns, almost 300 yards passing. Now, as we talked about last week, I think he was doing this against this secondary, which has not looked good this year. So, there's a reason maybe we're completing some of these passes. But, small sample size. Dwayne was 4 for 4, 46 yards. Definitely had some zip on the passes he threw. I think that if nothing else, he looks like a very positive player for the future. And, people have kind of jumped over Joe Burrow, who I think we all expect to be back here pretty soon, given we saw him warm up this week and looked good doing it. So, I don't know what they're going to do when JT's time comes to an end, whenever that is, but I think you've got to be very happy with the potential of the future. Again, small sample size with both of these guys. I think Joe's played in 3 games. Dwayne's played in one. But, I think at the very least you're happy as a Buckeye fan that the future is bright. And, I know people are frustrated with JT. The kid keeps winning, though, and it's hard to argue that. Doesn't turn the ball over very often, gets the team up and down the field. I think there's a lot of things that they need to do as an offensive staff to put him in better positions to win, because I don't think they're going to bench him, like it or not. I think this is his team until he's done here, and or unless they have, some issue of some kind.
Yeah, I agree with you. It would take an injury for them to bench JT Barrett. That wouldn't be a benching. He's not going to get benched. I mean,
right.
It would take an injury for him to lose his job. I completely agree with you. Before I let you go, talk about the future looking bright. I mean, the future and the present looks bright at the tailback position with J.K. Dobbins. I mean, even after the game, Urban Meyer said, quote, "He's a perfect tailback. He's a space player that we have needed." I mean, that's just – he's called him special before. He now says he's the perfect tailback. I mean, he has said some nice things about Mike Weber over the last couple of years, and Mike Weber's a good running back, but Urban's never said anything like this about Mike Weber. He never called him special, never said that he's the perfect tailback. And another great game for J.K. Dobbins, ran for 172 yards against Army, 13.2 yards per carry. He now has 425 rushing yards in the year already after just 3 games. I mean, this kid, he has just been – I thought he was going to have a pretty good year. He has just already just blew past my expectations, Patrick.
Yeah, he's blown back, I think, even his own expectations. He was talking post-game about, he's not surprised that he's had a good start to his college career, but that he didn't see this kind of opportunity coming. And I think we can, they're not going to say Mike Weber's not a starter, but 13 carries for JK, 4 for Mike in this game. Now, Mike's still, probably not 100%, but it's obvious that JK is the guy that they're going to rely on, and you can tell why. Running the ball, when he's got the ball in his hand, he's a special player. There was a reason that they went after him like they did. He probably would have been more highly recruited had he been able to play his senior year. Let's remember, he played 1 snap, I believe, his senior year before he got hurt, broke his ankle, leg, something like that. So this is a kid that enrolled early, did what he needed to do to make sure he was ready to go day one. Maybe got a little fortunate that Mike was hurt, but I think we would have seen a good amount of him anyway. I do think pass blocking is still an issue with him. The standard has been set by Ezekiel Elliott, and right now JK's not great at it. A couple times in the game against Army, they either got pressure on JT or got hits on JT because JK didn't pick up his block. That's something that you're going to work on. I think you kind of live with that with a talented freshman like he is. So, he did it against Indiana. Wasn't as good against Oklahoma. Obviously very good numbers against Army. I'm going to be interested to see when they play a little bit tougher defenses, especially run defenses, how they kind of approach JK to try and shut him down if he becomes kind of the bell cow running back. But very impressive. Not only on the field, I think, talking to him, he seems like a good kid, level-headed, doesn't seem to be letting the early success get to his head. So, I think the Buckeyes have a special player here. The pass protection is the only thing that I can point to and be like, that's something the kid needs to work on. And obviously that's something I think most high school running backs in their first 3 college games are going to have to work on. I know Zeke is the standard, but I'm not sure how he would have done if he'd been the starter the first 3 games. So a lot to be excited about there. And I think, another guy real quick to bring up, Trayvon Grimes was a guy that got into this game. 1 catch, made his first catch for 8 yards. It's interesting to see him in, a guy that's coming off a torn ACL. They don't think he's fully 100% yet, but getting in the game, his 3rd college game. So, I think that's promising too. They, didn't play the young wide receivers much early last year, and that was a big thing we talked about. So to get him in, obviously the injury to Johnny Dixon helped boost that playing time a little bit, but good to see from another young talented player.
Great stuff from my guy Patrick Murphy. Really appreciate it, Patrick. As Patrick said, we will interview Urban Meyer today at 11:45 a.m. as we talked about earlier. We also will have our Lunch Buck segment, Facebook Live, around 1 o'clock from Catalina's restaurant. We've got a lot of requests to go to Catalina's, so we're going to listen to our listeners out there and our readers who have requested Catalina's. So probably about 1 o'clock, we'll put a post up on Bucknuts, and let you guys know. And if you miss it live, we'll post it on Bucknuts so you can watch it. But it's probably around 1 o'clock today from Catalina's well for Facebook Live, recapping Urban Meyer's press conference. And you also can follow along Urban Meyer's press conference today on Bucknuts.com. Thank you very much to Patrick Murphy, and thanks to all the listeners out there for tuning into the show. I appreciate it and hope you have a great day. Let's hear that Buckeye swag, best damn band in the land.